welcome in. It is really great to have you joining us for this deep dive today.
Absolutely. Glad you're here.
We're going to be pulling from, honestly, a really fascinating stack of information today. And it covers what might initially seem like a completely wild, disconnected range of topics.
It really does seem all over the place at first glance.
Right, because we're going to look at the inner workings of the music industry, and then we're going to dip into evolutionary biology, examine this intense modern chess rivalry, and even explore the creators of Bitcoin and BitTorrent.
Which sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, but there is a massive unified mission tying all of this stuff together. We are going to decode the hidden rules of power and dominance. We'll look at how people usually play these intricate social games, and then we're going to reveal how an unexpected third type of thinker is, well, completely breaking those rules to win.
And I think that's the real core of this, because humans, much like animals, are constantly navigating these complex social hierarchies just to get ahead and secure resources. But the goal for today isn't just theory, right? It's incredibly practical for you listening. By the time we finish, you're going to have a much sharper eye for spotting these subtle power dynamics playing out in your own workplace. And more importantly, you might just learn how to successfully opt out of them entirely without sacrificing your career.
Yeah, which is the dream, right? So let's start with a really relatable example of how these power structures form, which is the music industry.
A perfect example.
Because back in the early days of the internet, there was this beautiful, almost utopian illusion that the web was going to completely democratize music.
Oh yeah, the idea that anyone could just upload a song from their bedroom.
Right. And the best art would just naturally rise to the top. But instead of destroying the old power structures, the internet essentially just reconsolidated them.
It did. And economists actually use some specific terminology to describe the reality of what happened here. They classify the modern music industry predominantly as an oligopoly. It simply means a market where a very small number of massive firms suppress competition. So we used to talk about a big six in music, but consolidation has left us with the big three: Universal, Sony, and Warner. And today, those three labels control over 70% of the recorded music market. But the dynamic gets even more restricted than that because it's also classified as an oligopsony.
An oligopsony.
Right, if an oligopoly is about having very few sellers, an oligopsony means there are very few buyers.
Okay, got it.
So imagine a town with thousands of workers, but only 3 factories. In the music world, you have a massive, practically infinite number of artists trying to sell their work, but only a handful of major labels and streaming platforms buying and distributing it. And academically, you'll sometimes hear this ultra-consolidated state referred to as a monomonopoly.
A monomonopoly. So
Right.
if you're an artist today, you aren't really facing fewer gatekeepers. You're just facing a different set of them entirely. Instead of some radio DJ making or breaking your career, we now have this intense algorithmic gatekeeping. Streaming platforms use editorial playlists like Spotify's Rap Caviar to dictate exactly who gets visibility and who just remains completely obscure.
And the major labels adapted to this perfectly.
They really did. They shifted to these massive 360 deals that take a cut of literally everything an artist does. They leverage their massive historical back catalogs to maintain leverage over the platforms. And outside of recorded music, you have entities like Ticketmaster maintaining an absolute stronghold on live events.
But if we step back and look at the bigger picture here, what's crucial to understand is that this kind of dominance isn't necessarily a calculated evil conspiracy.
Right.
Economists and evolutionary biologists point out that this consolidation is actually a mathematical and biological reality. It's what is known as a superstar economy.
Yeah.
These economies are driven by natural distributions, like the power law or the Pareto principle, that famous 80-20 rule, where 80% of the rewards naturally flow to 20% of the participants.
Or Zipf's law, right?
Exactly, Zipf's law, or the Matthew effect,
Yeah.
which is that sociological phenomenon where the rich get richer simply because success inherently breeds more success and visibility.
So we see this artificial gatekeeping in the music industry. But if you strip away the Spotify algorithms and the complex record contracts, you find that this exact same mathematical power dynamic is just hardwired into nature.
It's everywhere.
Dominance hierarchies are in ants, fish, elephants. There's a fascinating example from our sources with angelfish. A dominant angelfish will actually use a very specific, mild form of aggression just to signal a rank conflict to subordinates who aren't foraging properly.
Yeah.
Or take female gorillas. When their reproductive needs are high and they require more calories and resources, they actually become far more aggressive toward the powerful members of their group to secure what they need.
And that animal behavior translates almost perfectly to human environments. Well, in nature, when a subordinate simply tries to gain access to a limited resource, like a better patch of food or territory, the dominant individual frequently misinterprets that as a direct, aggressive attack on their status.
Okay.
The exact same thing happens in the office. If you try to secure a bigger budget for your team or ask to take the lead on a high-profile project, the dominant winner in your department rarely views it as just a request for resources.
Right. They see it as a threat.
They perceive it as a fundamental threat to the established hierarchy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that makes a lot of sense, but it begs the question, how do humans actually navigate this? If you're dropped into a deeply entrenched hierarchy at work, what are your options for climbing it?
Right.
Because when you look closely at the psychology from the research, it generally boils down to two traditional paths: coercive dominance and prestige-based dominance.
And the distinction between the two is really quite stark. Coercive dominance is your classic might is right strategy. This is when an individual seizes and maintains their rank through fear, intimidation, and intentionally withholding resources.
Like a classic bully.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, this path is strongly linked to the dark triad of personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
Yikes.
But on the other end of the spectrum, we have prestige-based dominance, which is the pro-social path. Here, rank isn't taken, it is freely conferred by the group. The individual gains dominance by displaying valuable, rare skills, sharing their knowledge, and actively helping the entire group succeed.
But what if someone isn't purely a bully or purely a saint? Because most people we deal with at work aren't cartoon villains or perfect angels, right? Is there a middle ground?
There is, and it's a highly calculated hybrid profile known as the bi-strategic controller.
The bi-strategic control.
Yes, these individuals are absolute experts at navigating both paths simultaneously. They employ what psychologists call Machiavellianism.
That's a great term.
It is. It's a proactive form of pro-sociality, where they will absolutely help you, mentor you, and act cooperatively. But you have to understand that their kindness is strictly a tactical tool. They are doing good solely to build a loyal follower base and maintain absolute control over resources.
So this is the boss who takes you out for lunch, gives you glowing feedback, but then subtly takes all the credit for your project in the executive meeting.
Exactly. And the moment their status is genuinely threatened, all that warmth just vanishes. They can instantly pivot back to coercive, intimidating aggression to protect their rank.
That is incredibly manipulative. And it actually bridges perfectly into one of the wildest concepts we're looking at today. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Red Queen effect.
Oh, this is fascinating.
This is the scenario where a dominant player intentionally helps their competition improve just to force their own continued growth. It's essentially saying, I'm going to teach you how to beat me so that I am forced to evolve and become even better.
It's a brilliant, if exhausting, evolutionary strategy. And the ultimate historical example of this in the business world is the dynamic between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs in 1997.
Yes.
At that time, Apple was weeks away from total bankruptcy. Microsoft was the undisputed dominant winner. But Microsoft swooped in and saved Apple with a $150 million investment announced at Macworld.
Which blew everyone's minds.
Right. Now, Gates didn't do this out of pure altruism. Microsoft was facing massive antitrust and monopoly investigations from the government. They desperately needed a viable competitor to prove to regulators that a competitive market still existed.
I remember watching footage of that Macworld announcement. Steve Jobs is on stage, and Bill Gates is projected on this massive screen behind him like Big Brother.
Looming over him.
And the crowd was actually booing Gates. Jobs famously had to calm them down and say, we have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose.
The irony, of course, is what happened next. Gates' calculated help gave Apple the exact financial runway it needed to survive, create the iPod, then the iPhone, and eventually crush Microsoft in market cap for a long period. But the psychology behind that specific kind of help is deeply complex. Psychologists call it the paradox of the gift, or hostile altruism.
Hostile altruism. That is incredibly dark. So essentially, the helper is trapping you in a cage made of their own generosity.
Precisely. When a dominant player gives a massive amount of help that cannot possibly be repaid, it creates a permanent status debt.
A status debt?
Yes. The receiver gets the resource they desperately need to survive, but they lose their independent status in the process. This almost inevitably breeds a deep, malicious envy. The receiver feels trapped because their eventual success is no longer entirely their own. It will always be viewed as a derivative of the helper's brilliance and mercy.
Wow.
The helper essentially uses their generosity as an insurance policy and a reputational shield.
You can actually see this exact dynamic playing out today in modern chess. Look at the intense rivalry between former world champion Magnus Carlsen and the young prodigy Gukesh D.
Yes, that's a perfect modern parallel.
Carlsen uses a brilliant bi-strategic approach. Before a match, he might take a coercive dig, dismissing Gukesh as one of the weaker players in fast formats. But then, if Gukesh manages to beat him, Carlsen completely pivots. He offers this incredible pro-social praise, complimenting Gukesh's intense work ethic and calmly framing his own loss as being soundly punished by a great player.
Which perfectly illustrates a psychological phenomenon known as do-gooders irritation. It's one what fans and opponents often resent when Carlsen issues this calm, generous praise after a loss. It acts as that reputational shield we talked about. He is subtly framing himself as the ultimate objective judge of the game. It signals to everyone that he is so vastly superior and secure in his legacy that he doesn't even view the loss as a real threat worthy of anger. To an observer who wants a raw, gritty rivalry, that hyper-graciousness can feel incredibly condescending.
That completely reframes how I look at sportsmanship. It perfectly explains why fans absolutely adore raw winners. Think of Mike Tyson in his prime or Michael Jordan. They openly admitted they loved crushing the competition. There was absolutely no fake humility.
Right, and researchers argue that this raw honesty is actually a form of aesthetic altruism.
Aesthetic altruism.
Yes. By showing raw, unhidden joy in the destruction of their opponent, the winner is removing the gaslighting of fake humility. They are validating the loser's struggle. Implicitly, Jordan or Tyson is saying, "You were such a massive, legitimate threat to me that beating you brings me immense joy and relief."
That makes total sense.
It prevents that toxic status debt because the loser was beaten by a superior, aggressive force, not saved or patronized by a merciful one.
Okay, so we've seen the coercive game, the prestige game, and that manipulative by strategic middle ground. But now we have to shift gears to the ultimate disruptor. What happens when someone simply refuses to play the social game at all?
This is where it gets really disruptive.
Because there is a third path, the competence is right strategy. And historically, this is predominantly found in neurodivergent profiles, particularly individuals with autism or ADHD.
To really understand this, we have to look at something called the intense world theory.
Okay.
Often, what looks like a social deficit or awkwardness from the outside is actually the result of sensory and cognitive overflow. The microcircuits of the brain in these individuals are hyperreactive. Because the world is so overwhelmingly intense, they exhibit what's called low social monitoring and instead rely on hyperfocus.
So they just tune out the social noise.
Exactly. They retreat from the chaotic, unwritten rules of human interaction into the crystal clarity of logic, systems, and data. And because they genuinely do not care about social status, office politics, or climbing the ladder, the traditional gatekeepers are entirely powerless against them.
That's a huge point.
You cannot control someone with the promise of fame or the threat of social exile if they simply do not value those currencies.
The cognitive advantage there is just staggering. Think about the average workplace. A huge portion of the workforce is exhausting tremendous brain power on status anxiety. They are sitting in meetings constantly wondering, do they like me? Am I winning this argument? Is my boss setting a trap?
It's exhausting.
Right. Meanwhile, this honest dominant is allocating 100% of their processing power to the task itself. They aren't playing the player, they are only playing the board. They bypass the gatekeepers simply by being undeniably objectively correct.
And when you look at history, the individuals who employ this strategy often reshape entire industries.
Let's really look at some of these stories, starting with Dr. Temple Grandin.
An incredible example.
She was up against the meat oligopoly, an incredibly tough, traditional, male-dominated network of ranchers and executives. She didn't try to charm them. She didn't try to play their coercive games. She used what is described as shadow logic.
Right.
Grandin, who is autistic, has explained that she thinks in pictures, literally like a VCR tape playing in her head. She went into these facilities and noticed that cattle were panicking over things humans ignore. high contrast shadows, or a dangling piece of chain. She redesigned the entire systemic flow to align with the animal's actual sensory experience.
And she didn't win over the industry with a slick pitch.
No, she drastically reduced bruised meat and lost profits. She forced the industry to adopt her methods purely through indisputable return on investment.
We see the exact same pattern in the digital world. Take Graham Cohen, the creator of BitTorrent, who has Asperger's. He looked at the entertainment oligopoly and completely broke it.
He really did.
He didn't try to build a community and ask people nicely to share files. He hard-coded a tit-for-tat logic directly into the protocol. If you didn't upload data to others, your own download speed choked. He mathematically engineered cooperation, making the old centralized gatekeeper models entirely obsolete.
It's brilliant.
Or consider Dr. Michael Burry during the lead-up to the 2008 financial crisis. While all of Wall Street was blinded by social consensus and groupthink, reassuring each other at networking lunches that the housing market was fine, Burry completely ignored the social element.
Just tuned it out entirely.
Yes. He sat in his office alone, hyper-focused, and read thousands of pages of dense mortgage prospectuses. He predicted the crash because he trusted the raw math over the comforting social lie.
One of my absolute favorite examples of this mindset is the brilliant physicist Paul Dirac. His colleagues at Cambridge literally invented a unit of measurement called the Dirac, which equaled 1 word per hour because he was so socially oblivious and quiet.
That's amazing.
When he won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1933, he actually wanted to refuse it, not out of humble bragging, but because he genuinely wanted to avoid the attention and the press. He only accepted it because his colleague, Ernest Rutherford, logically pointed out that refusing a Nobel Prize would generate significantly more publicity than just taking it.
Pure logic, won out.
Exactly. There is this wonderful famous anecdote where Dirac finished a complex lecture and a colleague stood up and said, "Professor, I don't understand that equation on the board." Dirac just stood there in silence, staring at him. When the moderator finally asked if he was going to answer the question, Dirac simply replied, "That was not a question, it was a statement."
It is the ultimate unapologetic decoupling of objective truth from social nicety. And it's not just history. This is driving the modern tech landscape. Look at Andres Freund, the Microsoft engineer who recently saved the entire global internet from the massive XZ-utils backdoor cyber attack.
Oh yeah, that story's wild.
He wasn't hunting for glory or a massive promotion. He uncovered this sophisticated nation-state level hack simply because he was personally annoyed by a 500 millisecond latency during a login process.
He just noticed a tiny lag.
Exactly. He just wanted the system to be perfectly efficient. You see this ethos in figures like Vitalik Buterin with Ethereum or George Hotz. They continually prioritize shipping efficient, elegant code over navigating the exhausting realities of corporate politics.
But if we're talking about the ultimate honest dominance move, it has to be Satoshi Nakamoto.
Oh, without a doubt.
Whoever they are, they created the trustless architecture of Bitcoin, completely bypassing the massive entrenched gatekeepers of central banks and fiat currency. And then they did the unthinkable. They just walked away.
Just vanished.
They left an estimated 1.1 million Bitcoin worth tens of billions of dollars entirely untouched. Their final message was simply, "I've moved on to other things."
That is dominance by absolute absence. By disappearing, Satoshi proved they had zero ego need for worship or control. It removed the single human point of failure and made the system truly trustless and incorruptible. They built the truth, ensured it worked, and then they left the room.
So, bringing all of this back to you, the listener, if you are hearing this and thinking, "That's me, I am that systemizer, I just want to do the work and ignore the politics," there is a major practical risk you need to be aware of. Psychologists call it the double empathy problem.
This is crucial to understand.
Because you don't care about status, you are often completely blind to the envy building up in the people around you. You are highly vulnerable to sabotage because you simply don't realize someone is trying to steal your credit or destroy your reputation until the knife is already in your back.
Fortunately, there are very concrete solutions from the research to protect yourself if you fall into this category. You need to implement what are called structural shields.
What does that look like in practice?
This means removing ambiguity from your work. Keep indisputable paper trails of your achievements. Whenever possible, ensure public attribution by using shared environments, things like GitHub, Google Docs, or Slack, where edit histories, timestamps, and your direct contributions are visible to everyone.
Makes sense.
You should also rely heavily on clarity dialogues. This means regularly regularly sitting down with your supervisors to explicitly ensure your technical goals align perfectly with their expectations, leaving no room for subjective misinterpretation later.
Another great tool mentioned in the sources is creating a workplace user manual, sometimes called a manual of me, to share with your team.
I love this idea.
It's so practical. This is a document where you explicitly tell your colleagues how you operate. You can state clearly that you prefer absolute directness over sugarcoating, that you always assume positive intent, and that your bluntness is a commitment to accuracy and efficiency, never a personal attack.
It's also vital to find a social proxy. This is a trusted mentor or a work buddy who possesses that high social vigilance that you might lack. You need someone who can read the room and act as an early warning system for office politics, tapping you on the shoulder when a situation is turning political.
It's like having a translator for the office hierarchy.
Exactly. And it is worth noting that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, organizations are legally required to provide reasonable accommodations for different cognitive and communication styles. It proves that this competence is right strategy isn't just a quirk to be suppressed, it is gaining real institutional and legal backing.
Let's wrap this up because we have covered incredible ground today. We started with the oligopolies of the music industry and the dominance hierarchies of the animal kingdom. We navigated the altruism trap, the Red Queen effect, and the manipulative warmth of the bi-strategic controller.
We really went everywhere.
And finally, we uncovered the incredible power of the systemizing hero, the individual who bypasses all the toxic social games by being undeniably, unhateably competent.
The ultimate takeaway for you is awareness. Whether you naturally lean toward being a pro-socialite who effortlessly navigates the room, or a systemizer who focuses purely on optimizing the task, your success depends on recognizing the environment. You must understand which game is being played around you and by whom, so that you can consciously choose your moves or build your shields wisely.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. We've talked extensively today about how the honest dominant walks away from messy social games to build pure, objective systems.
Right.
But as artificial intelligence rapidly begins to master those very same objective systems, writing flawless code, solving complex math, optimizing global logistics, will the hyper-focused competence as right strategy still be enough to survive in the future workplace? Or will those messy, deeply human pro-social games of charm, empathy, and office politics actually become the only skills left that anarchists? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. Keep questioning the hidden structures around you, and we'll catch you next time.